All right, there has been a lot of debate today in the wake of the speech by the Minister yesterday. Also, there's been more debate about religious freedoms. Should it be legislated, and if it is, what does it look like? All these things are squarely on the government's agenda. And joining me tonight is two people who'll be in the thick of it all when the Parliament resumes. LNP Senator for Queensland James McGrath and Labor member for the WA seat of Cowan, Anne Ali. Both of you, thank you for joining me tonight. Some really important issues we're going to talk about, James and Anne, issues that go to the heart of who we are as Australians and what modern Australia looks like. James, you're from Queensland. We're not really clear what your Minister for Indigenous Australians is proposing, other than to say he wants to move on this issue of constitutional recognition. There's also the ancillary issue of this new voice, Indigenous voice, I want to say to the Parliament or to government or to wherever it's loosely defined. We're not sure where he wants it to be. But the initial decision of the government is to try and entrench that in the Constitution, which means a referendum. The Minister said yesterday, if that doesn't pass at a referendum level, or they don't think they've got the question that the people will support, you may well do it through the Parliament anyway. Where do you stand in all of this?
Well, I'm opposed to race being put into the Constitution. I'm opposed as an old school Tory in that I believe that if change is not necessary, it is necessary not to change. And I'd be reluctant for the Constitution to be changed that would entrench effectively one race or one group of people above all other Australians. I think we should be all treated equally by the Constitution. And secondly, I'd be concerned that any changes to the Constitution could lead, this is where the law of unintended consequences come in, that could lead to some form of third chamber. In terms of what Minister White said yesterday, and I made a point of watching his speech, and I read it, I think it's in one of the newspapers today, and I need to probably hear more from the Minister in relation to what he's talking about with this voice. But if this voice is some form of constituent assembly, I certainly would oppose that. We already have a parliament. You know, it's got the Senate and the House of Representatives. All Australians can vote for it over the age of 18, and all Australians over the age of 18, bar the usual people are ruled out because they're in jail or mad, can run for Parliament. So I'm very reluctant at the moment in terms of where the Minister is coming from here and needs to be convinced. And I've just come from the Liberal National Party. We're meeting this weekend. It's our annual convention. I'm speaking to a lot of my party members, and they're certainly reluctant and not too keen on what they understand that the Minister appeared to be talking about yesterday.
I think the lack of clarity, Anne, is a real problem for the government here, because it was a far-ranging speech, but it wasn't clear at the end where the government was going. They talked about a voice, they talked about constitutional change. Neither of them were really well defined. Now, Labor have a well-defined policy. You want to see the voice enshrined in constitutional change, so that's via a referendum. You'd put it up. If it failed, it wouldn't happen. If it did, obviously, the Constitution would be forever altered. Do you think that's the government's issue here and problem, I have to say? Where do you think it's going to go?
Well, Peter, I'm inclined to have faith and trust the members of Parliament who are Indigenous. I have faith in Ken Wyatt. I have faith in Linda Burney and Pat Dodson and Malanderi McCarthy and the members, the Indigenous members of Parliament. And I think we should be listening to them. We had the biggest consultation with Indigenous Australians, and they came up with the Uluru Statement. Now, it's all very well to say, oh, well, we have representation of people in Parliament, but what good is it if we don't listen to them? What voice do they have if we can't even take direction from them on what is going to matter for Indigenous Australians?
Yeah, but hang on, the Parliament's constituted by everyone who's run the gauntlet of an electorate and been elected. You're just not there to represent Muslim Australians. You're not just there to represent women. You're there chosen by the people of Cowan to represent everyone of all backgrounds, all faiths, all genders, all races. We already have 4 people in the parliament who are of Indigenous background, probably more. To be fair, there are probably more, but there's 4 that identify as Indigenous. In proportionate terms, that's far more equal than there is women versus men in the parliament when you look at the population of Australia. But we take that the laws coming from your parliament, you sit in, that James sits in, are laws that we all live under and abide as Australians. And that's how we define ourselves as Australians. Aren't we setting ourselves up to have 2 class of citizens in this country? Those that have 2 bites of the cherry with an Indigenous voice and a parliamentary voice that we all have, and the rest of us who just have 1 parliamentary voice.
I think that argument about the voice to Parliament being some kind of third chamber is really unfounded, to be honest with you, Peter. I really do find that as an unfounded argument.
Why is it not?
Because we all, as you said, we do have a Parliament, and I do think that in the past we have not listened to Indigenous
answer the question.
people.
Why is
and if we're not going to listen to them now, we're not even listening to them now.
But why is it not a third chamber?
We're not listening to them. Why aren't we listening to them, Peter? Why aren't we listening to... And I take your point that, yes, I'm not in there to represent the Muslim community, but I'm not the member for Muslim, you know, and I'm not the minister for Muslim. We have, for the first time in our history, an Indigenous Member of Parliament who is the Minister for Indigenous Affairs and a shadow minister who is the Minister for Indigenous people, who is also of First Nations. I think it's time we listen to them. If they don't have a voice, what chance do we have?
Yeah, but I still don't understand the point why it's not a third chamber. If laws pertaining to, say, tax policy or social security policies pass for the parliament, they apply to all Australians. Otherwise, we're down the path of apartheid if there's laws for some and not laws for all. If we already have those laws, they apply to everyone. What would this Indigenous voice do that's not divisive if it was to then re-look at all laws through the lens of their application to Indigenous Australians only? How is that not a third chamber of the parliament?
Okay, so Peter, you're assuming that all laws impact on everyone in the same way. They don't. Laws and policies impact on people differentially.
They apply to everyone in the same way, and they
may apply to everyone, but they impact differently. Now, let me take, for example, for you, the tax cuts. People on low and middle incomes have different spending behaviours than people on high incomes. Therefore, tax cuts may apply to them all equally,
tax cuts
but they behave differently with those tax cuts. They're applied differentially.
No, but that's based on the income in your pocket. That's based on something that could change tomorrow and not change or stay the same or change next week. Your race is something that is with you for your entire life. You don't change your race by spending more or spending less or changing your job and increasing or decreasing your salary. I'll bring you in, James. This is the problem with this division of Australia, pretty much for the first time in modern Australian history. I know we've issues of the past, absolutely, but we've bent over backwards as a country on a path to reconciliation to divide Australians no more by their skin colour, not by their gender, not by their ethnicity, not by their religion. How on earth are we contemplating what I would say is a really backward step here?
I don't think it's a backward step, Peter. Look, I reiterate the point that policies impact differentially on different groups of people, and
but they don't see race.
Absolutely, they impact differentially on our First Nations people. They need to be. We need to do impact statements to ensure that when we have policies, we are not
but we already have impact
impacting
statements
on them differently.
Look, we have impact statements on policy in relation to Indigenous impact and impact in relation to regional Australians. I've seen them all on cabinet submissions. But if we're going to judge laws based on their impact, we won't have any laws decided by men that deal with pregnancy or deal with women's issues. Are we going to say that...
It's not the point, Peter.
Well,
it's about having a say in that law. I'm not saying that men can't make laws for women, but women need to have a voice in those laws, right? It's a difference between representation and no representation. When people are absent from the decision-making process, the decisions that are made completely ignore their needs. We need to have people present in the decision-making process.
Well, James, I disagree.
This is the danger. Sorry.
You go,
This is the
James.
danger here. You see, this debate is divisive. We've seen it with the discussion tonight. What will happen is that whatever this voice is, it can become a third chamber. The law of unintended consequences come in, and suddenly everything is we're going to see Australians, either Indigenous, are going to be compared fairly or unfairly against non-Indigenous Australians. We're all equal. We all have the same vote and the same capacity to run for Parliament. And I don't want to see any third chamber that acts as some form of almost political apartheid coming into Australia. What we should be focusing on.
Wow, that's a strong word there, James. You know what? If we're all equal and we can have equal representation, why don't you give up your seat to an Indigenous person?
Well, why don't you?
Well, they can join the Liberal National... Hang on. They can join the Liberal National Party and they can run for pre-selection any time they want to.
Yep.
In terms of the Liberal National Party, was the first party to have an Indigenous senator with Neville Bonner back there. I don't want any chamber in Australia where people are selected on the basis of their race. I want all Australians to be treated equally. What I want to do is focus on public policy in terms of that young Indigenous Australians have twice the suicide rate of non-Indigenous Australians. I want to talk about infant mortality. I want to talk about education standards. I want to talk about practical measures that can help Indigenous Australians rather than setting up some form of race-based talking shop as a third chamber. We've got a Commonwealth Parliament comprised of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Anybody, regardless of their race, can be elected to those chambers, and anything else beyond that dilutes the Constitution and will divide Australians and should be opposed.
I think
well, how about you give Indigenous people a little bit of respect and listen to them on those issues rather than telling them what the solutions are?
I think that's where the Parliament comes to its very best. I mean, I think it's a great credit to Australia that we have four members of Parliament elected to the Parliament, particularly Ken White in the lower house, where he stood against all comers. The Senate, the way the ticket's organised is obviously a little bit different, but all Australians, many Australians who are not of an Indigenous background chose an Indigenous man, and in the case of the women, Linda Burney as well in the lower house, chose an Indigenous woman to represent them, not because she's necessarily Indigenous or a woman or man and Indigenous, because they felt that that candidate was the best person to represent their interest. I think that's an enormous step forward, and I fear to say that this is a step back. I also say there's a lot of politics being played. Let me run a grab today from Linda Burney. She's the Labor spokeswoman on the issue of Indigenous affairs. It's clear that if there is a referendum, Linda Burney doesn't want to have a level playing field. Let's have a listen.
No campaign can go as hard as it likes, and I don't think it should get public funding. I know that many referenda, there is public funding for a yes and a no case, but really there is no argument.
Okay, Jane, so Linda Burney's saying that if it goes to a referendum, and traditionally we have a yes case, we fund that, we have a no case and we fund that. And she's saying that there should be no money for a no case on this issue.
Well, I strongly disagree with Linda on that. I think both cases should be funded publicly. If there is to be public funding, I think it's important that any possible change to the Constitution is truly tested in the court of public opinion and that voters can make an informed decision. The real danger here is that we rush into making changes to the Constitution that will have far-reaching impacts on about how Australia is governed. And one of the good things that Minister White did say yesterday is that he wanted to take a considered approach to this issue, and I'd like to work cooperatively with him where possible. But in terms of public funding, both sides certainly should be funded.
All right, let me just move to the issue of John Setka. And it looks like Anthony Albanese, who got plaudits for taking on the issue of the CFMEU's Victorian chief, John Setka, when many others, leaders of the Labor Party, haven't had sort of the gumption to do that. But it looks like it's hit a snag with a judge today delaying the case that Setka has brought, saying that he won't have time to examine it before the meeting of the ALP National Executive, which was pushed out a little while ago to give natural justice to John Setka. It doesn't look like they'll be able to resolve this issue. How is it going to come to a head?
Oh, look, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think, we should have expected that John Setka wasn't going to go so easily. I think Anthony Albanese was very decisive on this matter, and I think that Labor should be able to expel people who do not uphold the values that Labor espouses. I mean, if you can't take a fight in upholding your values, what else is there? So I don't know. I don't know how this is going to end. I don't want to predict how it's going to end, but I do hope for a resolution sooner rather than later, Peter.
Yeah, and also on your side of the fence there, James, Pauline Hanson's come out today to say that the relationship's sort of broken down with the coalition in many respects. She says there's a risk you take her for granted or that you're disregarding her in this parliament. And she's also made it clear that she's got a better relationship at this point in time with Anthony Albanese than she does with the Prime Minister. How are you going to repair that?
Well, I think it's important that my party makes sure that we reach out to all voters in Queensland. There are a number of people who voted for the Liberal National Party. We've got a sizable majority here in Queensland, and there is a number of people who voted for Pauline Hanson's One Nation. We want those voters to come across to us. I hope that Pauline, as an elected senator for Queensland, will always do what's in the best interest for Queensland. I'd be a bit worried if she's snuggling up to Anthony Albanese, because Albanese looks like he's travelling in the proud tradition of Shorten and in terms of doing one thing in Queensland and saying something different down in Victoria. We should never forget, every time that One Nation get a high vote, you end up with a Labor government.
Do you think that's fair, Anne? Because, I mean, I see that there's quite a significant, depends on the state, but quite a significant, what I'd call an old blue-collar Labor vote inside some of those One Nation numbers. And is it just smart politics by Anthony Albanese?
Look, I think in regards to the article today and the comments that Pauline made, we certainly have a Senate in this parliament that's very different to the last parliament, and we saw with the tax package, for example, that the government didn't have to rely on One Nation support to get that through. So I think, it's quite expected that Pauline might be a bit salty on that. I think, in Australia, in every workplace, you're expected to work with people that perhaps you don't like or you do like, and get on with the job and put personalities aside. And I think that's what we should expect of our parliament as well. Just get on with the job.
And James, just before we go, have you had a response from the Prime Minister about your letter asking for a parliamentary inquiry, at least at a federal level, into the issue of nuclear energy?
I haven't had a formal response, but there are a number of discussions underway, and we saw that Barnaby came out today and has given his plan to have an inquiry in terms of the committee that he chairs. Keith Pitt, the member for Hinkler, and I, we just want an inquiry, whether it's in the Senate or in the Reps. We're pretty open about that. We want to have an adult conversation about nuclear energy, and I'd ask the Labor Party to be part of that conversation. If you want zero emissions, then nuclear energy is the way to go.
Anne Arley, James McGrath, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Peter.
Thank you.
All right, coming up after the break, I'll look into the debate on constitutional recognition. What does the plan mean and what sort of messages it's sending to Australians? We touched a little bit about it now. Let's talk to someone who's been writing about this subject for a very long time. Stay tuned.
You're watching